Hello, my friends. It's John Petersen from the Arlington Institute. And we get together like this. You've stumbled into our space today when Greg, Braden, and I have a conversation for about a half an hour, and we call it What's Up. And this is a derivative. Came up with this idea because of all the delightful and wonderful conversations that I've had with Greg
Mm.
driving back and forth from the airport, bringing him out to Berkeley Springs. And so I thought we could share some of that with some of our friends around the world. And so, Greg, nice to see you. What's up? What's on your mind?
Hey, John, it's good to see you as well. And I'm seeing you with a different background. I know that you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico for an energy conference,
I
uh,
am.
a Tesla energy conference.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to someone earlier in another call this morning, and this is how society has changed. I mentioned that I was going to be in Albuquerque for a Tesla conference. They assumed it was about the vehicles,
The car.
the car. And I
I
said,
know.
yeah, it's crazy. So it's good to see you. And John, there's so many things that we can talk about, and all of them are good. But what I'm really seeing is that at least people in my community here in northern New Mexico, it's a rural community. It's a mix of artists and artisans and craftspeople and musicians, performing artists, and salt of the earth kind of people that build things with their hands. They're hanging sheetrock and construction and farmers, a lot of agriculture. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting mix of a community, and they're all saying the same thing, John. There's so much happening in the world, they can't keep up with it. They don't want to keep up with it because it's exhausting and they feel worn out. And it is actually a catalyst for them to become more disconnected, more unplugged, and revert to a way of life for themselves and their families that they've known in the past and that worked, that was much less complex, while the world at large plays out whatever the drama is that's playing out. And it plays out in different ways. Some people just don't want to be connected, that they're not going to vote because they feel that the political system is broken. They're taking money out of the banks. They don't like the bank system. They don't want to support chain grocery stores, so they're growing their own food, and it's causing. We've never seen anything like this, at least in my lifetime, where so many
Yeah.
different things are happening at the same time.
Yeah. It seems to me like almost as though, in a variety of ways, like you just suggested, that there is this growing uncertainty which provides the platform, the context for which for people, as you've suggested, to begin to reassess who they are and get down to the essence of who they're going to be in this growing uncertainty. That is to say, it's a kind of a winnowing process, it seems to me. All of
Yeah.
us as humans are going into this space trying to decide on what side of the equation we're going to be as we go forward into a world or in this personal development or
Mm.
evolutionary kind of track. And we're given all of these amazing kind of situations and possibilities. And it just, every time you turn around, it's almost like giving you a chance to choose one way or another in little ways.
I think we tend to discount the significance of trust,
Hmm.
and the role that trust plays in the decisions that you're talking about in our everyday lives. Because in our lifetimes and in the last few generations, the trust has been a given that is
Yeah.
now faltering
The
level.
FBI.
I was just going to say this: the trust in law, the rule of law in Western democracy and in the
Right.
U.S. And I think what we're seeing now, we're within the last 48 hours, we've seen, if there was any question that the FBI was being politicized, I think that question went away in the last 48 hours. And so all this is
That,
fostering a level of the first reaction is to disconnect.
yeah,
And then the next reaction is when you disconnect, what am I going to do now? And so the response to that is to build something that meets the needs of the family and the community that is somehow not tied in to the systems that are no longer trustworthy.
it's interesting about how you rebuild trust or how you find another place where you can trust. How do you? I mean, that's an interesting question in itself. How do you? Where does new trust? How do you find new things to trust that give you some kind of a stability and an anchor in this very volatile kind of space?
Yeah. People are resorting to the things that they know, that have been tried and tested in their lives, tried and true, and at least temporarily pulling back from organized systems and large centralized structures. So when you put those together, John, 40 plus percent commerce being done through barter and over 60% a home school, what you see is a parallel society. It's not somebody's vision, it's happening right now, and it's only
Yeah,
growing as we see the things that we're seeing on television, the FBI raids and things.
yeah,
I mean, these are things that we used to see in less developed countries that
right.
didn't have the level of trust that the United States has had in the
Right.
past.
Well, people are extracting themselves from the system
Yeah.
because it's becoming obvious that the system doesn't work. And if you look downstream, it only looks like it's going to get worse. This extraction, whether it has to do with taxes or whether it has to do with barter outside of finance and everything like that, that's a very interesting kind of dynamic in the middle of this, and you could build some scenarios about where other places are that people are going to extract themselves out to essentially try to find independence, try to find stability outside of the present system.
When I look at all these little things, I mean, they're big in our lives, but they're components of a bigger picture. And I know it's happening in other states as well. How do you hold together a nation that has been based on common language and common
Mhm.
culture and common beliefs for over 200 years when all of those things now are becoming localized, centralized, or decentralized, and we're beginning to see ourselves more as independent communities more than national citizens.
Well,
John, you have any
I
thoughts
don't
on
think
that?
you do. As a matter of fact, you know that I follow Martin Armstrong, and
Yeah.
he says that you're going to get a global civil war here in a couple of years, and that out of the back end of the thing, many nations, including the United States, do not exist in the same way they have in the past. And maybe this is kind of an integral part. Maybe you can't save it in any reasonable kind of way, and that the present systems are just internally
Mm.
unsustainable.
And I think about this a lot, and I think there are advantages to a union of 50 states. Certainly, there are advantages, and I think there could be a path where we maintain a nation, but we do it from a regional perspective.
Seems to me the question, it's an interesting idea. The question is what kind of inertia there is in the present location or region or some other kind of thing, and the ability to be agile and to adapt to something else. And I uh, changed airplanes in O'Hare in Chicago yesterday, and I haven't been through there for a long time. We used to live there for 20 years,
Mm.
and uh, I was impressed by the amazing number of people in the airport and the dependence, the the systems are so encrusted in that town and big cities in general that the ability to kind of to adapt and adjust would be much harder than in your community or my community. And so you can see some natural kind of fissures or lines that where places are, easy to adapt and come up with new ideas, and others that
Yeah.
don't, I guess.
And what's interesting when I talk to my friends at the co-op, for example, they're seeing these windows of time. Like if we're going to make a change, we better make it now
Yeah, right.
before the next shoe drops. Before the next shoe drops. So they're seeing the summer and part of the fall as a relatively free and easy. Sometime in October, maybe November, people say something's up, and nobody
Yep.
knows exactly what it is, but there's all kinds of speculation, and it's just a feeling, but people are acting on that feeling, John. So,
No, no, I agree. I
yeah,
agree. I mean, you can feel it, you can sense it. I mean, there's this, it's an interesting kind of subtlety about the whole thing. And it's kind of not in your face, but it's this growing kind of uncertainty that has a point on it that, that says there's something coming here. Yeah.
I think people have been so hurt and so the trust has been damaged and destroyed. They're reluctant and cynical of new systems.
Yeah.
So it's gonna take some work to
But
convince
uh,
people that a trustworthy system is really available.
well, that would be a very interesting book or a project or some of this kind of a project for a think tank like the Arlington Institute to try to say, how do you rebuild, how do you reweave the kind of the underlying fabric that builds trust in a novel kind of new way, almost certainly. The principles would stay the same, but the manifestation and the way that you did it would probably certainly go away from large centralized kind of institutions that have provided the kind of the internal kind of glue for this kind of trustworthy kind of system. And it really is working its way out, as you suggested, the kind of
Well,
local or smaller
I'd love to have a
entities.
seat on that think tank at the Arlington Institute if that ever happens, John. So
You got a deal. We'll do
thanks.
that.
Well,
We'll
I want to
do
thank you for
that.
this conversation today. It's something that's been on my
Yes, sir.
mind, and I really appreciate your perspective on it.
It's always fun to talk to you, my friend. And we'll do it again in another couple of weeks. And for those of you who are watching, we thank you for being with us. And you can be a fly on the wall as Greg and I just chat a little bit. We were even talking about putting a camera in the car when I pick him up at the airport in September, and you can just follow us along for 2 hours as we drive
Yeah.
out to Berkeley Springs. But in any case, thanks so much, and thank you, Greg, and we'll see you all again on What's Up in a
Thanks so
couple of
much, John.
weeks.
Take care.